Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. In light of the successful Operation Rising Lion by the State of Israel against the Islamic Republic of Iran, during the course of which Israel has managed to degrade much of Iran's capabilities, there are significant implications expected, not only throughout the region but also beyond, since Iran was part of a broader axis from Russia, China, to North Korea, Venezuela, and others. And now, of course, we are also talking, while there is a NATO summit in the Netherlands, Den Hague, the Hague, where there is much discussion about the latest events throughout the Middle East, but also concerns about what may evolve out of the fragile situation at hand. To discuss on that and much more, let's now introduce our experts for today, to start with Mr. Marshall Billingsley, who is a senior fellow at Hudson Institute, formerly Deputy Secretary General of NATO, a Assistant Secretary of the Treasury for Counterterror Financing, and in a long list of other positions. It's great to see you, Marshall.
Good to see you again.
Also joining us is Brigadier General in Reserve, Yaron Rosen, who formerly served as the IDF Chief of Cyber Staff, an Israel Air Force commander, as well as a fighter pilot, along a long list of other issues as well. But it's great to see you also, General.
Good to see you, and I'm in my Zelensky outfit, so bear with me.
Yeah, all right. Well, how about we start with you, Mr. Billingsley, when we're talking specifically about the last 72 hours. We have, of course, now the NATO summit taking place in The Hague, Den Hague, during the course of which many of the alliance's leaders are going to deliberate not only the challenges facing the North Atlantic Treaty Alliance, but also the issues pertaining to the Middle East at large, the Islamic Republic of Iran in particular, and the very successful American attack also on Iran's nuclear infrastructure. Within that context, what is the alliance's perspective? We did hear Mark Rutte, the Secretary General, currently stating that they were very supportive of degrading Iran's capacity to attain nuclear weapon capabilities. But nonetheless, there is still a long way to go in a very fragile global situation.
The Allies have been very, very supportive. In particular, the German Chancellor had a number of very, very positive things to say, as you mentioned, the Secretary General as well. I'm sure there will be significant discussions in The Hague on the margins of the NATO summit regarding the current situation with Iran, because, of course, while Iran has been dealt a significant blow and its nuclear program set back an unknown number of years. The big question mark, of course, being how much of that highly enriched uranium, if any, survived and perhaps was absconded away. But Iran itself has not changed its stripes. There's been no renunciation of its nuclear weapons ambitions. In fact, the head of the nuclear program today is talking about restoration of its nuclear program. There's been no renunciation of its ballistic missile pursuits, nor of its support for terrorism. So the regime emerges in this ceasefire very battered. They've lost not just the capabilities you mentioned, but a lot of the internal regime control apparatus, the besieged headquarters, for instance, the broadcasting networks, and so on. So they're battered, but they are not out as the spider at the heart of the web of violence that still exists across the Middle East. I'll pause there. Happy to talk about what we expect from the NATO summit. It should be a quite good meeting.
Absolutely, we will revert to this question because I do think it's a vital moment in history, and this NATO summit has also a lot of significance to it. General Rosen, I'd like to hear your take on the current state of play, particularly with regard to the fact that while Israel was prosecuting a 12-day campaign against the Islamic Republic of Iran, Rising Lion, very poetic, biblical title to this campaign, but nonetheless, the war was raging on throughout the region while this was happening, with, of course, multiple strikes against the Iranian proxy in Lebanon, Hezbollah, in efforts to enforce the ceasefire and deterring it also from joining Iran in the fight. All the while, of course, the Islamist Hamas is continuing to defiantly fight on despite losing much of control that it had in the last several weeks. And the Houthis have also managed to launch a couple of ballistic missiles in the direction of Israel. Thankfully, those ballistic missiles were intercepted by Israel's surface-to-air capabilities. But all in all, how do you see the current culmination of the most intense fighting, namely against the Islamic Republic of Iran, impact the regional architecture?
I think first and foremost, Israel has struck a huge blow to, the head of the octopus. We've been talking about this for a very, very long time, since October 7th. And basically, conventionally speaking, Israel basically struck out Iran completely. It controls the skies. Iran has no way to project power besides the missiles. Okay, that's the only thing they have left. But if you look at it from a nation state point of view, us being able to fly anywhere in Iran to hit anything we want is a huge, huge stick, along with the United States support and everything that was mentioned before. So first and foremost, I think this really, really changes the whole picture, the whole strategic picture, which is a big thing because it really should change in the near future the dynamics of geopolitics in the Middle East. We saw these dynamics changing until October 7th. October 7th sort of took the part of these dynamics backwards, and some of them even stalled, Abraham Accords, etc. But now I think we will have a reinforcement of this new moderate Sunni axis, and we will really be able maybe to build a future for the Middle East without the Iranian awe, if you wish, and Saudi Arabia and the GCC states, all so afraid of Iran. So Iran is right now a paper tiger, in a way. It's able to shoot, but really it is a very, very weak nation right now. And I think that that's the only thing we have to be careful of, because right now we are in the interim period. So we had this 12-day campaign, which we did very good, again, along with the final nail from the United States. And now we need to make sure that in the interim, until we have a new nuclear deal, there is some kind of mechanism that allows us to control the nuclear file, the missile capability, and the rest of the things that we're worried. The proxies are, I think, many levels down because they are much more contained than they were. The Houthis, of course, being maybe the highest level of the still operating, but I think it will all be manageable in a way. So that's how I would, in a way, in the order, how I would prioritize the interim in order to reach a durable nuclear deal. By the way, JCPOA plus minus, because the context today, unlike 2015, is very, very different. All we need to take out is the sunset clause plus a little bit more a few more tweaks left and right. And basically, with the G7 and the United States, it might actually be a good goal.
Well, Mr. Billingsley, I'd like to hear your take on this, but also, if we may broaden the discussion somewhat to the economics. Iran has been battered now for 12 days after being already strangled by America's maximum pressure campaign being reimposed on it. Of course, there was still a long way to go, but enforcement has started to kick in, and we see that the Iranian economy was already reaching all new lows from the GNP or gross national product specifically. How would you characterize now post campaign of Rising Lion and Midnight Hammer, really bringing it to a potentially disastrous cliff?
Well, I think it's important that we not, snatch defeat from the jaws of victory here. This is a chapter that has now closed, but as I indicated, the Iranians have, as of yet, shown no inclination to alter their trajectory. So while the president has signaled to the Chinese, for instance, that he anticipates they will continue to buy Iranian oil, which is actually, I think, a pretty clever move in that it keeps the Strait of Hormuz open. Obviously, Israel could have bombed Karg Island and eliminated that export capacity, but chose not to, because at that stage, what do the Iranians have left to lose except to shut down the entire strait? So from a strategic standpoint, I think that's a wise maneuver. But as you point out, the actual executive orders and all of the laws on the books have the maximum economic pressure campaign continuing. And it should. It should continue relentlessly until Iran sits down at the table and negotiates. I disagree a little bit with your own, not a JCPOA plus or minus, but a real end to their nuclear aspirations, forswearing of enrichment and agreement that the IAEA can conduct anytime, anywhere inspections under the NPT and its additional protocol. These are conditions that I think would be further bolstered should the Europeans move forward at the Security Council, as they should, to snap back sanctions on Iran. We can always remove those sanctions on Iran once the ink is dry, but we should not allow ourselves to fall into the trap that Joe Biden fell into with endless dithering by the Iranians as they clandestinely move forward to reconstitute.
And as you mentioned already, the Iranian Atomic Energy Organization has already announced that it's not shying away from its inherent right, as it put it, to enrich uranium and to pursue a nuclear program. I'm not sure that they're willing to try the same thing over and over again and expect different results, since that's not going to be a different result, despite being a little bit skeptical, from my perspective at least, on the political will on the Western side to prosecute yet another campaign after another. Some solution needs to be found. But nonetheless, with the economic situation in Iran really in shambles, of course, America allowing it now to export the little it has to China in order to keep the Strait of Hormuz open, which is a smart move from President Trump's perspective. Nonetheless, it seems like the Ayatollah regime is still poised on maintaining a certain unique relationship with its various proxies. And my question mark here is, at a time when war is still being prosecuted, at least in Gaza, the Houthis are not completely dealt with. What does Israel do in this context, General Hussein?
It's a great question. I think everything is tied to each other. I mean, I think that if Israel, if I'll take it actually to President Trump. President Trump's political capital now is very high because the risk he took in approving and getting into the fight and not standing on the sidelines, provides him with leverage over Israel and over the other players in the neighborhood here in the region. So if this is used wisely, I think that the first goal would be to end the war in all fronts. So get a deal with Gaza, get it in a timely manner, not next year. Some of Bibi's government want this to go on forever. So there needs to be a timeline to end the war in Gaza, the hostages, and a deal with Lebanon. I think that if if there's an overarching deal here, I think the Houthis will stand down. We will need to deal with them in the long run because they are a terror entity inside Yemen. There's no other way to do that. We don't need to, lift the sanctions over them because they are a terror group and they should be dealt with as a terror group. Putting that aside, we want them to stand down in relations to the Straits of Bab el-Mandeb. So I think the key to this is a full regional end of war to all the. One is the interim agreement with Iran, super complicated because of the high sensitivity of the regime to the nuclear ambitions, as was discussed, and probably will a little bit more. And parallel to that, making sure that Bibi stands down in Gaza, reaches an end game in Gaza because it needs to be done. And then I think the Houthis and Lebanon, and I think that will lower the flames in the region immensely.
Mr. Billingsley, I'd like to hear your take on this, but when we're looking at the NATO summit, of course, Hudson Institute is the partner organization at this NATO summit with our colleague at Hudson, Peter Rao, heading the European Center, being the tip of the spear when we're talking about the current summit. So all the best to him from here. I'd like to ask you, with your vast experience, of course, in the alliance, how does the alliance deal right now with the fact that there are issues in the Middle East? One of those issues, of course, it is one of the key fueling factors within Russia's capabilities to prosecute its war in Ukraine, namely the Iranians with their various components of both Shahed 136 to the other type of munitions. Shahed 191 is, of course, employed there quite often as well. Has the war in Iran somehow impacted Russia's capabilities in this regard, or is this just only partially impacting, since much of the infrastructure creating those drones is in Russia proper?
I think it's definitely affected Russia in terms of some of the capabilities that they were still receiving directly from Iran. It certainly has affected Russia's credibility as an ally, because at the end of the day, when push came to shove, Vladimir Putin left the Ayatollah hanging. And I think that has, not gone without notice. At NATO, the focus, of course, will be much less on the situation in the Middle East. I think the Europeans will be relieved that, at least for now, the situation is handled. And they will be very, very focused on Ukraine. And so, to the general's point, President Trump's political capital, I think, is very high. I think especially important is the fact that Xi Jinping undoubtedly took notice and should be questioning how the United States might react to his ambitions to invade Taiwan. But the war that is also still raging and is at hand is the continued Russian aggression against Ukraine. One of the results, and there will not be, I think, a lot of written documentation coming out of the summit, other than I think you will see, and this has been pretty clearly telegraphed by the Secretary General, that the alliance will up their mutual agreement to defense spending. You'll hear a lot about 5% GDP expenditure. Don't really focus on that, because the 1.5% of that 5%, the new 1.5 metric, is basically stat padding. It's stuff that countries are already doing, but they're lumping it in to make the amounts seem higher than they traditionally have been. The significant number, the important number, the valuable result of the summit is the 3.5%. So all of the allies, except for Spain, who continues to be a disappointing freeloader on the alliance, but every other ally has committed to up from 2% to 3.5% in hard, as we are now saying in the United States, lethal defense spending. And this is a very, very positive development. It would not have happened absent President Trump's pressure.
Jonathan, can I add one more thing?
Please do, if I may just make one a scathing remark with regard to the Spanish leadership, which I think is horrendous, and their pursuing of the various activities that they're doing, signing with Venezuela and with Iran in many of the various activities on the global stage, including with China. It's not a good standing member of NATO these days, and that is an understatement. Go ahead, General.
I just wanted to add that I think one of the biggest things that this campaign really proved and projects globally is the Elionut, superiorities, sorry, the superiority of US made and Israeli made quite a lot weapon systems, armaments, munitions, and whatnot. And if I am Russia, besides the fact that I just lost everything I had, I gave to the Iranians, this is something really, really challenging. It's really hard to resupply Iran now with air defense systems. And basically if you give it to them, they're going to be shot and killed and wasted. So if I'm Putin, I'm not going to give anything else more because it's going to be wasted there. But it also projects into the war between Russia and Ukraine, and it projects also the military collaboration between China and Russia in a way. It is a huge blow to their industries in every way you look at it.
Absolutely. In this regard, we did hear General Zen during the course of the war, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, of course, being very rhetorical towards Israel, very hostile in his rhetoric, to say it mildly. But one of the points that he said, lessons learned from the conflict between Israel and Iran, is that Turkey needs to stand on its own industry and start really develop a very large surface-to-surface capability that may oversaturate and become a type of deterrent rather than just a tactical capability. Is that something that Israel should be concerned by?
First of all, yes. Turkey, we're seeing Turkey now, in Syria. We're basically, that's one of the things we spoke about when Syria collapsed. The first thing I think we mentioned on the show we had here was that basically there's a NATO F-16 that's going to meet an Israeli F-16 on the border somehow, and we started talking about this deconfliction that we need, and everything about the Air Force bases in Syria being struck just so the Turks don't deploy into Syria. So is this a concern? Yes, it is. The Turkish defense industry is a very, very serious industry. It was part of NATO's build of, F-16s are built there, etc. And I think I'm very happy that the F-35s are not built there, because I think that would be a huge mistake. But I think that with Erdogan as the crown, as the king or the Caesar, if you will, it should be something that Israel needs to manage and de-risk constantly, with the United States, of course, as the overarching partner strategically to contain all these risks.
Indeed. Well, Mr. Billingsley, the meeting, of course, between Erdogan and President Trump is due to take place on the sidelines of the NATO summit. All the while, we are also looking at, from a geostrategic perspective, at the Middle East right now, where China and Russia and North Korea have gained or have lost a very important piece in their axis, so to speak. Even though the Iranians are very eager to continue, they're no longer a very significant part of this equation. How should we look at this? You have roughly 2 minutes to argue your position.
Well, I think that The president and Erdogan have a very strong, mutually respectful relationship. I'm sure Erdogan will press again for being allowed back into the F-35 program, which they were evicted from because of their decision to buy the Russian S-400 air defense system. A very, very poor decision by Erdogan. That was a decision to evict them made by President Trump in the previous administration. So we'll see how that discussion goes. On the point that you made about Spain, and I've said something, a version of this to the Secretary General myself, but there need to be consequences inside the alliance. They cannot be allowed to just deadbeat along. There should be no Spanish general officers or flag officers in the integrated command structure or on the IMS staff. There should be no new hires on the international staff of Spanish nationals. Spain should be removed and put as an observer in the budget committees. Why would we give Spain an effective veto through the consensus process when they're not actually willing to put money where the alliance needs? So there need to be consequences for the Spanish. And my hope is that after this summit, the Secretary General, within his own unilateral authorities, will take some of these measures and implement them.
And with regard to the strategic power competition, the Axis, you have 30 seconds for that.
Definitely, reduction of Iran affects the Axis. The war rages on, which continues to in Ukraine, which continues to give China enormous leverage over Russia, because in essence, China's serving as the lifeline financially, serving as the lifeline for dual-use technology that is going into the weapon systems now. And so much more work needs to be done both by the United States and with our NATO allies to pressure China to change its course.
This is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to thank Mr. Billingsley and General Ozen for all of your valuable insights. I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem, Shalom.
As the geostrategic landscape continues to shift at unprecedented speed, Deep Dive is a weekly update you cannot afford to miss.
There is zero chance that Iran will back away from its terror support.
We have a direct threat against Russian interests.
That's what's at stake. It's not Syria. It's a Middle Eastern order.
Whoever has the most guns, whoever has the most money, the most backing, that's who's going to be in charge.
From Jerusalem to Washington, watch now. Hudson Institute's Deep Dive.